The Great Global Revolt is currently underway with mass protests in Sri Lanka, China, the Netherlands. But what has caused this issue? What does it really represent? And importantly, are these mass protests going to start springing up in the rest of the Western world? I'm Stuart Hooper, a lecturer in political science and PhD researcher. Be sure to subscribe if you are new here to the channel, where I always cover current global affairs from a very critical perspective, not an ideological perspective. So you're never going to hear me saying that the mainstream parties are going to save us, because they're not. They're actually an intimate part of the problem, as are mainstream ideologies on all sides of the spectrum. I think we need to reconsider this whole global structure, and it would appear that there are many, perhaps millions of people that are currently involved in doing just that. And these protests, of course, have come about as a result of the current economic devastation that is sweeping the globe in the form of inflation. Why is inflation so disastrous? Because it quite literally erases your earning power. And in a low-wage global economy like we currently have, well, this is precisely the thing that is going to happen. And more people are starting to take note of this. Of course, as we see in this headline, a popular uprising against the elites has gone global, and the author writes that this is against, quote, the luxury beliefs of the elites, as everyday folk realize the harm those beliefs cause them and their communities. And the main luxury belief of the elites that I talk about on this channel, of course, is that belief in a liberal world order, or perhaps, if we kind of wash away some of the euphemism that term represents, a transnational empire of elites, by elites, and for elites. Now, the protest in Sri Lanka, of course, is the one that really grabbed headlines over the weekend, with protesters storming the presidential palace, taking it over and refusing to leave until the government itself leaves office. And what are these protests about? Rising food costs, fuel shortages, and electricity cuts. In other words, when the basic necessities of life, food, fuel, housing, energy, become unaffordable for most everyday people in a country, you have a very big problem on your hands. And as we shall see, this is not just going on in places like Sri Lanka. This is happening in the Western world, and therefore, perhaps it's time that we start to ask the question, are these mass protests coming here, and coming quickly? But before we do get here to the Western world, I think this is another very important headline that just came up today. Violent clashes after hundreds show up for a Bank of China protest. Now, what happened here is the deposits of these people have been frozen for some supposed upgrade of the servers of the bank, but there has been no communication since then with the bank's customers, and this means some $5.8 billion of people's money is frozen in these accounts, and they cannot access it, they cannot use it. What do you think that means for their livelihood? Don't forget what happened in Canada just a few short months ago. Feels like a world away because everything that has happened since then. But do you remember the Canadian government shutting down the bank accounts of protesters in Canada? Yes, this can and does happen in the Western world. And of course, what does that mean? You could get a very similar violent response. And let's take a look at the Western world, where we are seeing a big time uptick in protest movements here in the Netherlands. Now, the government over there decided to propose some climate change policies that are going to make farmers use less fertilizer and decrease their livestock by about 30%. So reduce your livestock by 30% to meet this climate goal that the country has, and perhaps somehow do something to solve that problem. Forget about the fact that that could mean a 30% drop in your income, in the profits that you're going to be able to make. And of course, that's why we saw 40,000 Dutch farmers in their tractors protesting throughout the Netherlands, blocking major roads, major highways, shutting the entire country down. And of course, what did they face? A violent police response. Yes, the state is always ready, willing, and able to crack down on anyone that refuses to go against its agenda, and that is a global problem. And in my opinion, we are going to start seeing far more of this sort of thing, both mass protests and violent state responses. Just take a look at this headline. We don't need to go any deeper into this article than the headline. Germany starts rationing hot water and turning down the heating in case Russia cuts off its natural gas supplies. When you combine that rationing of hot water with everything else going on in the Western world right now, meaning skyrocketing gas prices, food prices, housing prices, it's almost not even a prediction to say, I think these sort of mass protests are going to come to the Western world sooner rather than later. It's bordering on a guarantee. And in fact, one professor, William Robinson, wrote a book on this that just came out called The Global Civil War. He believes this is the degree to which the current world faces a crisis. And what is it really a crisis of? Globalization and a complete reliance on this system of globalization for all of our basic necessities of life. So when the taps start to get shut off in certain places around the world, as they all were as a result of a political decision during the pandemic, what did we expect was going to happen? This was inevitable. And now we have a complete disaster on our hands and people rapidly losing hope about their future. This is not the world that we want to be living in. Remember to subscribe if you've made it all the way to the end of this video. Would love to have you as a regular viewer as I continue to document the collapse of world affairs. Not always a fun thing to do, to be perfectly honest, but a lot of these headlines don't get as much attention as I think they should, and they're not usually synthesized like this as I do in my videos. So if you like this style of video, if you like the analysis that I'm providing, I could really use all the help I can get to share these videos. At least hit the like button, that helps to get the video out into the algorithm, and leave me your comments below. Some of you are leaving exceptional comments on my videos. I mean, really thoughtful stuff. If you guys are in my class, you'd be getting A grades for some of these comments. So thank you all very much for those. Very much appreciated. And I'll be back with more videos covering all of this, the crisis in Ukraine, and everything else that's falling apart around us in the very near future.